California dreaming about you.
Hey guys, SimCoder here, and today we are going to learn how we can show the users stories, display the images that they have in their stories. So the code will be really similar to what we did last time, which was just to show the users that have stories that are less than 1 day old. So yeah, let's just go for it. I'm going to open up our Snapchat clone, and keep in mind I'm going to copy a lot of code around, so if you have any doubts about the code that I'm implementing, then please check the previous video, because in there I go into detail to why I'm doing this the way that I'm doing it right now. So the first thing that we need to do is to create an activity, and I'm going to go inside here, right click it, new activity, empty activity, and I'm going to give it a name of what? Image display? Okay. Or display image. Display image activity. Let's create it. Give it some time. And in the meantime, we must find a way for the user to get to this activity. And the way we are going to do it is to go into story view holders, which is what we did in the previous lesson, one of the things that we did. And we are going to implement, so implement view.onClick listener. And we are going to import, better yet, create the methods. So Alt enter enter, and it will create it for you. So anytime the user clicks on a view, on an item of the RecyclerView, which is a user that has a story for us to view, then this onClick method will be called. So let's just create an intent here, not that, intent, okay, which will send us straight into the display image activity. So equals to new intent view.getContext, and this is the way that we have to get the context of our view, and it isn't capitalized here, it is just view, and the view, it is this one. So this will get the context of our activity, which is exactly what we need. And then image, better yet, display image activity.this. Okay. Now we are going to add a bundle, because we must send the ID of the user whose story we want to see to the display image activity. And we do that by using a bundle. So bundle b equals to new bundle. And now we place a string inside of the bundle. So put string, and let's give it the name of user ID. And now we simply say email dot get tag dot to string. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if you remember our previous lesson, in there I added this line, which is holder email.setTag, and it would add the UID of the user that we are adding to the RecyclerView. And so because we do this, then we can successfully get the UID of the RecyclerView item that we just clicked on. Let me check one thing here. In here it isn't this, it is class, I'm sorry. Was finding a bit strange to have an error there. Okay, now we simply associate the bundle with our intent. So intent.put extra b, put extras, not extra, be careful about that. Then we say view.getContext dot start activity, not this, intent. Okay, and now we can go ahead and close this up, and all that we have to be left with is the story fragment, because we need some code from here, and the display image activity. The first thing that we are going to take care about is the XML, so the layout, and I'm going to change the constraint layout to a linear layout, even though I believe we'll change this later to a frame layout, because maybe we want some things on top of the image, but for now this is enough. Close that up, and I'm going to add an image view. Let me change this to my keyboard. Okay, image view. It will wrap around the parent, so it will be match parent, match parent. The ID can be image, and the scale type fit XY, so that the image goes and fills up the entire image. Okay, I'm going to close that up. And now I'm going to start working on the image, the display image activity. So yeah, the first thing that we need is to declare a couple of variables. First of which will be user ID, which is the user that we want to show his ID. Then we need an image view and image. And finally, we'll need a boolean, which I'm going to explain in a second why we need it. And we're going to set it to false from the get-go. So I'm going to give some spaces right here. Okay, and the first thing that we need is to actually get the bundle. So I'm actually going to open this up again, just to show you what we are going to do. We need to get the bundle that we passed from here. So let's go inside here and say bundle b again equals to get intent dot get extras. Okay, and then we call the user ID and say that it is equal to extras dot get string, not extras, I'm sorry, I was looking the other way, b dot get string, and inside here we pass the name that we passed on through here, so user ID, and this will give us our user the ID of the user that we want. Okay, now let's call in the image view, find view ID r.id image. And now we'll create the function that will get all of the images that the images URL that are associated with this user. So for that, I'm going to go into story fragment. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go inside and copy all of this function, the listen for data. I'm going to change some things around, but the core of the function is the same. Import all of that. Now I'm going to remove first the for, which we don't need a loop for it because we already know which user we want to find the images of. And I'm going to remove this child right here because we already have the user ID that we want. So user ID, okay. And now we keep these all the same. However, we can remove the UID and the email because we won't need it. What we do need is a image URL. Okay, so let's create it, image URL. And let's initialize it, even though it is already initialized, but I think it looks a lot better like this. We need the timestamps because we will be calculating to see if the image is less than 1 day old, even though we already calculated it in the story fragment. And that's because in here we only want to know about the dates, and in here we want to know about the dates and the URL. So this might not be the best way of doing things, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it is, because if a user leaves the story fragment open for a lot of time, then let's imagine he leaves the app open for a week. Then he would be able to see the images that are older than a week because we didn't calculate them in here. I guess that makes some sort of sense. So yeah, it is just one more step, no problems there. So yeah, let's do it this way. So okay, now we can clear this because we won't need it. And in here we'll be adding the image URL, which we'll get from here really quickly. And let's see what's the name that I gave it. So image URL, this is what we want. Let me just copy and paste that. Make sure it matches exactly what you have in your database, otherwise you won't be able to get it. And instead of parsing it too long, we can remove it and simply say toString and be done with it. Okay, and now what we'll have to do is to add all of the images that we get from here into an array list. So let's create it right here, and you'll understand why we need this in a second. So not private, you can wherever, it doesn't need to be. Array list string image URL list equals to new array list, open that, greater and lesser, or lesser and greater, I don't know how you say that, and parentheses, and don't forget to import array list, so Alt Enter Enter. Okay, and now we'll be adding the images URL to that list. So simply say image URL list dot add image URL. And now we are going to use finally the boolean variable that we have right here. So this boolean is kind of like a flag that will indicate to us whether we have loaded the first image into the better yet, if we have found the first image or not. So if we have, and let's say if not started, so if it is the first time that we find an image, then we set the started to true, and we start displaying images. And this is important because we must trigger the display sometimes in the code, and this is the best way of doing things. So let's call a function called initialize display. Create method. Okay, now that it is created, we can start displaying images because the image URL has something in it. And we'll need a couple of actually only one variable right here, which will be private int image iterator, which will tell us in which position of our image URL list we are in, so that we know if we have reached the end, and so that we can control when the user taps the image view to change image, and after 10 seconds, let's say, the image changes automatically so that we know which image to get. So now we'll be using glide, and let me check one thing. Okay, so we haven't imported glide into our Gradle. And glide is a library which I'm going to get right here, that I've talked about in the video that I released like a week ago, where I talked about the most important libraries that you should have in your that you should know about. And glide is one of them, because you can get images without having to worry about anything. So you can just give glide an URL and it will automatically get the images that are in that URL. So that's the reason why I'm getting it. So going to glide, copy this, implementation and annotation processor, come back here, build Gradle, and simply paste that into the dependencies. I'll be linking the glide GitHub site down below if you have any trouble finding it, but you won't, believe me, it is literally everywhere. So sync the project, and yeah, while it syncs, what we want to get is this URL, which when we get, we will be able to throw into our glide into a glide function, which will load it automatically into our image view, and that's how we are going to go about things. Okay, so after the Gradle has finished syncing, we can simply go in here and say glide dot with get application dot load, and this is where the image URL gets to play with, and image URL list dot get image iterator. So this is the first time that we are loading an image into our image view, and so the image iterator is 0, which is the first position of our list. And now we say into, which will be the place where we throw the image at, and image, which is our image view. Okay, now we are going to say image.set onClick listener, new onClick listener, because we want the image to change anytime you click the image view, just as it is on Snapchat. And then we'll call a function called change image. Let's create the method, and it creates it for you. Okay, so now we are going to make an if that will check if the image, if there are not, if the image list has reached its end, and if it has, then the activity will kill itself out and will go back to the previous activity. So if image iterator equals to image URL list dot size, then we say finish and return. If it hasn't, then we say image iterator plus plus, which will increment the image iterator, and we will call this glide with application again. So it will load the next image in the list. Okay, so that's it. And now all that's left is to change the image automatically, so that the image can only be displayed for 5-10 seconds, whatever you want. And for that we'll use an handler, which is a function that allows us to call a function various times within a time frame. So for, let's say, final handler equals to new handler. So let's create that object. Okay, and now we'll set the delay, and this delay is the time that this function that we'll create in a second will be called every milliseconds. So say final int delay equals to 10,000, and 10,000, remember this is in milliseconds, so this is equal to 10 seconds. And I'm actually going to make just 5 seconds so that it is easier for you guys to see when I test and compile when I compile and test the app. So now let's create the set function, handler.postDelete new runnable, and now we'll simply change image. So let's call that function that we've just created, this one. Okay, and we need one other thing, which is first of all to go in here and say comma delay, and the second of which is to call this handler again. So handler dot post delay this comma delay. This will keep this handler going time and time again until it reaches this if and the activity kills itself out. Okay, so I believe that's it. We don't need anything else. Yeah, it looks good. All that's left is to listen for data. So let's call the function right there, otherwise nothing would happen. And okay, so let's run the app and see if everything checks out. Okay guys, so the app finished loading, but there are a couple of problems that are really easy to fix. So the first thing is in the story view holders, you must attach the setOnClick listener. I forgot to do this. It is basic, so it was an oversight on my part. Just type item view, which is this variable right here, dot setOnClick listener this, which is this method right here. And the second thing is that the image URL list size must be -1 right here, because the image iterator will be always at the top, one below the image URL size, because it starts with 0 and not 1. This is really important. If you don't do this, the app will crash. So yeah, that's all there is to it. Let's go into our app, and currently I'm logged in as user 1, and user 1 is following user 2 and 3, and user 3 has these 3 images right here that are less than 1 day old, so they all should appear. So let's go into the right. It is kind of hard to do this in an emulator, so let's click user 3, and the image will show up, and it should change every 5 seconds. There we go. And if I click, it will change automatically to the last one, and after that it should kill the activity, and it did. So yeah, it is working just as it should be, with no problems. I'm happy with how things are going. I will be making a really big change in the near future, which is to change the camera to the camera API 2. I believe that's his name, because it is a better, more new API, and it will allow us to do more things. But for now, the first API, the camera API, is good enough. It is just so that we can send things to the database, get them back, whatever. It doesn't need to be all fancy, but when we want to apply filters to the images and things like that, then we must have the newest API. Yeah, in the next lesson we will start working on sending images straight to specific users, and after that the app is practically done. So yeah, I hope to see you again tomorrow, and ciao!